Let's begin, shall we? Saturn? We need a little Saturn planetary gong today for what I'm about to talk about because this is intense. So, my name is Darren Austin Hall, the Wisdom Warrior, spiritual enthusiast about spirituality. Da. Still playing with the titles. So today, I'm going to bring, once again, a spiritual perspective on a global happening in the world. Because it's time. It's time for spirituality to assert itself as not some hippie fringe thing, but as a pragmatic methodology, philosophy, ancient wisdom, pioneering new innovative thought, feeling, idea, system, what have you, that can really generate a lot of excellence in ourselves and in the world. This is why I fall in love with spirituality. And I've been involved in spirituality and spiritual practices for close to 2 decades now. So before I talk about this thing, which is, talking about some of the real shadow aspects that are being revealed in the world, namely this global pedophilia network, which is really unearthing just how deep not only the sociopathy goes in the halls of power in our world, but you could really just say it's psychopathy. So before I do this talk, I want us all to just let's take a few breaths into our heart center. Let me bring this gold crystal bowl forward for us. And I'd like you just to take 3 deep breaths into your heart and just breathe in the energy of love. A strong, fierce, universal sense of love. A love that is warrior. Let's breathe that in together. Seeing your heart shining with beautiful radiant power. And one more time. Love is not some soft, tender thing alone. It is a power of unity that demands all things that are divided come into its embrace. This one goes on for a while, so I'll just... So, yes, we are in intense times, my friends. We are in the age of apocalypse. And if you know me, you know I am a stickler for words. I get really off on etymology. I like putting words into etymology.com and just tracing the threads of where words came from and seeing how words can morph through time. And apocalypse is one of my favorite words because if you look back, apocalypse has traditionally meant not the end of the world, but it means the time of great revealing. Now, for people who maybe have things to hide, it would be the end of the world. And that's why I think around 400 years ago, some of the church fathers actually changed the word apocalypse to mean something really, really negative. But really, it means a positive thing. It is the time of great revealing, of truth coming out to be held universally. And you know what? We live in an age where that is now possible with the burgeoning of the internet. I remember, I was of the generation where the internet first showed up when I was a teenager, and I remember the world before the internet and the world after the internet. And let me tell you, it was probably one of the most radical shifts, not only in our current history of a generation, but in human history. If you just think about what this technology has done, how it's woven everyone together in the world like never before. But one of the most powerful things it has done is it has given a lot of power to the people to really take knowledge back into their own hands. If you haven't witnessed, there has been a true war on consciousness for eons now. We're talking thousands and thousands of years. Graham Hancock did a profound TED Talk on this. Highly recommend checking it out. Graham Hancock, War on Consciousness TED Talk, which was censored. It was one of the first TED Talks that was ever censored. So it's got some really interesting truths in there. Really, really profound. And we live in a time now where with the internet, we have the means to do a lot of our own self-knowing about things. Now, some people, of course, get really freaked out by that, like, oh my God, fake news, all these things. It's not going to be a clean, simple technique of going out there and figuring out the world for yourself, but I'd much rather have people doing that themselves, discussing hopefully in groups where they can get alternative perspectives and really come to a community creation of truth rather than just taking what the mainstream media is telling us, because we all know the mainstream media is corrupted and compromised by corporate interests and a lot of other weird stuff. Anyhow, if you have been paying attention to the mainstream media, it's been very interesting what's been happening in the last number of years, and this is very harrowing. If you're like me, I've been one who's actually been involved in studying conspiracy theory for a long time. Back when I was younger and I came out of media school, actually, we were studying it more as called disinformation. But then it got labeled conspiracy theory, and there was a whole negative derogatory connotation with that, which I think is not very good for the cause of truth. But if you've been following conspiracy theories for a number of years, you know that there's this idea that there is a global pedophilia network that a lot of the global elites are partaking in. Human trafficking, child trafficking, even like some really dark stuff like child sacrifices and children being killed. And this is nasty, nasty business. And this is actually all over the airwaves now, thanks to the arrest and suicide of Jeffrey Epstein and all the people who are connected to Jeffrey Epstein. We're talking like all the most powerful people in the world have been connected to this guy. But Jeffrey Epstein is really kind of like the thing that broke the camel's back, because if you've been following this story for longer, you know that in the UK, a number of years ago, they were hit by the Jimmy Savile scandal. Highly recommend Googling that if you want to know more. He was best friends with Prince Charles, huge media personality. And all of this came out after he died, but he was involved in the raping of thousands of young boys. And he was working in a network of tons of powerful people in the UK. And this was all hidden by MI6 and covered up by the media. There's been lots of stories about that. And then, you know, the butler of Buckingham Palace being caught in a pedophilia network, which, you know, makes you think about this whole Prince Andrew thing. It's all kind of coincidental, I guess. But and then, of course, you go into the Vatican and how the Roman Catholic Church is pretty much the nexus for pedophilia on the planet. And there's just so much increasing evidence that's coming out about that. I just saw the other day one of the papal ministers in charge of investigating some form of child abuse in America was actually found to be a child abuser himself. So it's wretched and it's scary, and you know what? We've got to face this. This is part of the reality that we're living in. I know people don't want to know about some of this stuff. We'd rather ignore it, but I want to give you the perspective why it's important for us to know this stuff. We are literally going through a shadow work on a collective level. Shadow work is really next level stuff. Carl Jung talked about it. It's next level psychology. It's really about looking into our unconscious wounding mechanisms in our psyche and how that conditions behaviors in us that are perhaps not in our best interests, not aligned to the best common human values of peace, love, and kindness. The whole work of psychology, as Jung said, is literally bringing more light into the shadow. It's tough, it's intense work to really look at one's woundings and trauma points and try and really absorb the wisdom, the learning that is there, that we can only glean and integrate when we face it. So a lot of people are getting into this on an individual level. It's very next level spiritual practice, spirit being, you know, that one unified energy that weaves all of us in the universe. And to be spiritual is to really want to be in a state of union connection. So a true spiritual person wants to do shadow work because they want to be undivided increasingly within themselves and in their relationships out there in the world. So what we have right now is we're witnessing the light of human consciousness has gained so much strength, has gained so much empowerment that it is shining all over the place into the multi-dimensions of our reality. And that's why a lot of this stuff is being revealed. So it's a good thing. It's a good thing because it's also an indicator that the awakening is on, that people are waking up, and that the light of consciousness, because consciousness has always been synonymous with light, whereas vice versa, unconsciousness is with dark. The light is clearly shining very bright. And it's intense to look at this stuff, people. I know it is. But why it's important is because it helps to make us understand why our leaders continue to act in such sociopathic, psychotic ways, making decisions against the environment, against human rights, greedy, rapacious decisions that are always propping up the banks over the interests of the poor and even the middle class. It's frustrating, I'm sure, for everyone who's been, looking into politics, to just see this continual corruption among political leaders. And this is why there's a really immoral set of practices that are going down in the halls of power. And this is one of them, one of many. But this pedophilia, having these literally throwing parties where there are sex slaves, things that Eyes Wide Shut was trying to show in Stanley Kubrick's movie um, called Eyes Wide Shut. So what can we do about all of this? This is where I just want to tie things up at the end. This is really we're facing with a kind of crisis on the level of consciousness, and this is why it's very, very important right now for all of us to hold vibrations of love, a fierce love, and really almost as if we're cleaning the world vibrationally. It's a time for us to get together with things like crystal singing bowls, in group meditations, to really exude beautiful healing energy to all the victims of this tremendous atrocity. And there's many children that are being rescued all over the place. There's a real crackdown happening on human trafficking. To send lots of love and light as well to, here in Canada, the Indigenous women who have been affected by these global human trafficking networks. That's a huge problem that needs to be gained into awareness. And then that's an ethereal, energetic thing we can do, because really this is happening because there is really a kind of magical war that's happening on the planet. And those that are in the negative have been doing these practices to sort of pollute the astral dimensions, the dimensions that are beyond the physical. And this pollution then rains down upon us, distorting our behaviors, distorting our societies. This is the psychic pollution side of the physical pollution side, the pollution of our physical ecological world. They're in tandem, they're a mirroring for each other. So we can do a lot of cleaning on that level. This is where sacredness in our spiritual practice really leans into activism. I would really set out the challenge there that every day send out a prayer of love and light for those that have been affected by this, but even the perpetrators. I know this is a hard one, but even sending love and light to them, because they are also a part of this reality, and they are also very deeply involved in their shadow. And I do believe the human soul can be rectified, can be redeemed. So we want to send healing to them, a fierce healing, not an easy, you can get off, no problem. No, we really want to zero in and put heat on these people to change, to transform, and realize that this is not a part of our unity consciousness reality that we're constructing on the planet now, that the Mayans have told has been harbinged. The harbinger of the 2012 calendar has been brought in, this new wave of unity consciousness on the planet. And then on top of that, get aware about this stuff. Start talking about it with friends in compassionate ways, in meaningful ways, because a lot of this is really triggering for people, and it's going to take time. Be patient with people who are asleep to some of this stuff. It's really hard to bring up, and it's not our job to go and shout and scream at people that everyone wakes up to these kinds of truths. But discuss them, raise awareness when you can. And eventually we're going to cause more and more heat to be put on the halls of power, and they're going to start to shake as they are right now. There's a real collapse starting to happen in those halls of power. Prince Andrew has stepped down from public duties, which is a great sign that things are really starting to change. And I'm sure there's going to be loads of other changes like that in the world. So just wanted to give my perspective on this thing, because I know it's affecting a lot of people and it's bringing people down. But hey, we are spiritual warriors. This is what the work is all about. This stuff has been hidden from us for too long, and we are strong enough now to integrate it, to transform it, to use it as a motivation to create a world of peace, love, and beauty for all. That is our duty. Power is your presence. Be glorious.